Hey guys, welcome back to Universes Beyond. You're back with myself, Yordo, with an extremely exciting deck tech today, centered around one of the upcoming commanders from Duskmourn. It was spoiled yesterday, and I had to jump on to build a deck tech because it's an extremely exciting, salty commander, which is what I'm all about. It's a 9 mana total cost to cast it. It's got a 9/9 body, flying, lifelink, ward, sacrifice 3 non-land permanents. If a card you didn't control would be put into an opponent's graveyard from anywhere, exile it instead. During your turn, you may play cards exiled with VALGAVOTH if you cast a spell this way. Pay life equal to its mana value rather than paying its mana cost. Insane payoffs. Insane payoffs. So if your opponents want to target this, they're sacrificing 3 non-land permanents. It's going to be very difficult for them to do that early game, even late game. If they sacrifice 3 non-land payoffs, actually, you're going to be putting those into your exile, which is going to allow you to then, as myself playing VALGAVOTH, if I cast this later, I can play those cards. So whatever they're sacrificing, it's playing into our strategy. It's got flying and lifelink off the bat, which is going to mean that it's evasive straight away. And it's going to mean that you're gaining life back if you're dealing damage, or if you're blocking with it, because you're obviously dealing damage, you're still being able to gain life back, which is kind of fueling its own engine, because whatever card, so just to focus on this for a second, right? It's not just creatures, it's any cards that your opponents would be put into a graveyard. Instead, it's going into exile. You can cast those basically for free. Well, you're paying life, so it's not for free, but you're paying life and you're slapping them down. That's anything. If they've got a Rhystic Study, if they've got any of these big Smothering Tides, some big cards get into their graveyard, instead they're exiled. So you're shutting down graveyard recursion as well from your opponents. You're shutting them down, and you're also being able to cast them onto your own battlefield. Insane. We're going to be doing some kind of graveyard stuff in here. We're going to be doing some battlefield controlling, and yeah, it's going to be insane. So stick around. This is going to be a brilliant deck tech that I'm very excited to build myself. There's also an alternate art version, which I think looks awesome. So I had to include it here, which I'm probably going to be buying myself because, yeah, I'm a sucker for alternate art cards. So we're going to be doing lots of sacrificing, getting your opponents to sacrifice stuff, also sacrificing your own things to get payoffs. So we're going to be generating some tokens, which are going to allow us to sacrifice to be able to do things. We're going to be also controlling your opponent's graveyards. Like I say, nothing's going to be hitting their graveyards. It's going to be going into exile as long as you've got your commander down. And you're going to be wanting to get as many life gain payoffs as possible so that you can fuel that kind of casting as much as possible and as frequently as possible as well. So I've got a couple of mana ramp kind of bits here, a couple of benefits to kind of get your commander in as early as possible. You do want to get your commander in ASAP, because as soon as he's on the board, he's shutting things down left, right, and center. So your standard Cabal ritual, you're basically going to be able to get 5 mana as long as you've got 7 or more cards in your graveyard, which is going to be very easy to do with this deck. You're going to be playing things like Dark Ritual to get obviously an additional 2 black payoff on top of that 1 black. Crypt Ghast is perfect in this deck, right? It's 3 colorless and a black, so 4 mana in total for a 2/2. It's a creature, right? So it's a creature 2/2. It has Extort, which means whenever you cast a spell, you may pay black on top of it. You don't have white, so you pay black. If you do, each opponent loses 1 life and you gain that much life. Insane. So each opponent's losing 1 life, right? So if you've got 3 opponents, they're all losing 1, you're gaining 3. And whenever you tap a swamp for mana, you're adding an additional black to your mana pool. We're playing mono black here. So you're going to have 10, 12, 14, whatever, right? You're going to have a significant amount of swamps that are going to be tapping for black, and you'll be able to double that up. So basically, we want to get your commander in as ASAP as possible. This is going to allow you to do so, and it's going to be fueling that engine of life gain back. So yeah, insane automatic include from my perspective. And the last one for kind of getting your commander out is Black Market. It's 3 colorless and a black. Whenever a creature dies, put a charge counter on Black Market. This is a creature, so you're going to be targeting your opponents left, right, and center, but you're also going to be sacrificing your own creatures. So this could easily get up to 10, 15, 20, 30, right, on top of this. So you could have 30 charge counters. I mean, that's probably best case scenario before this gets exiled. But the beginning of your pre-combat main phase, you're adding a swamp, so a black, well, not a swamp, but you're adding a black mana to your mana pool for each charge counter on Black Market. Insane. I think obviously it's 5 to get it down, so it's quite difficult to kind of get it down early. But if you had something like Jet Medallion that's going to reduce your, black spells by 1, these sorts of things, you'll be able to get this down a little bit earlier. But the payoff on this is insane in this deck. So yeah, automatic include for me as well. Grave Pact. This is 1 colorless, 3 black. It's an enchantment. Whenever a creature you control is put into a graveyard from play, each other opponent sacrifices a creature. So if you're sacrificing a creature, right, there's lots of ways to get other payoffs as well in this deck, and I'll go into those in a moment. But not only are you just sacrificing, even if you've just got like a 1/1 token, right, you sacrifice that, it's then giving you a payoff from the card that's sacrificing it, which we'll go into in a moment, but you're also then forcing your opponents to sacrifice one of their creatures. Each opponent is sacrificing a creature, which then fuels your commander. Basically, 3 creatures are going into exile that you can choose on your turn to cast by paying the life as opposed to paying the mana cost to be able to cast it. It's insane. It gets your engine going extremely quickly, and it's only 4 mana to get down. So basically you want to get this down as soon as possible and your commander, and then it's going to be flying. Dictate of Erebos. It's 3 colorless and a black enchantment, again with flash. Flash is very important on this one. Whenever a creature you control dies, each opponent sacrifices a creature. This is insane because if your opponent starts to target you, if they're doing a board wipe, which is getting rid of everything, you can flash this down. And if you've got 10 creatures down, right, each opponent is going to be sacrificing a creature. So, I mean, it's giving you benefits to being able to flash this onto the stack when people are trying to target you. It's a great card. It's allowing your opponents then to sacrifice a creature, and then you can, basically cast those from exile. So, I mean, the benefits of this is insane as well. And then on to the next, which is what I was mentioning earlier, is giving you an outlet of being able to sacrifice a creature and getting a payoff as well to fuel the earlier cards mentioned and some of the ones which are coming. The Viscera is perfect because it's only 1 black to get it down. You sacrifice a creature, you scry 1. So you can do this multiple times per turn, and it's a 1/1 vampire creature. So sacrificing, you're scrying. You can do that multiple times if you want. If you want to get through your deck to get to things like Demonic Tutor or some of your big black cards, which are going to be doing some insane things in this deck. Viscera is an automatic include because it's only a single black to get it down. Yawgmoth Thran Physician. It's a 2 colorless black legendary creature, human cleric 2/4. Protection from humans, pay 1 life, sacrifice another creature. So it's very similar to Viscera. You can do this multiple times per turn. Put a -1/-1 counter on up to 1 target creature and draw a card. So basically, if you've got 1/1 tokens, you can pay this once, put a -1/-1 on another one of your creature tokens. So you're basically paying 1 life, and you're being able to sacrifice 2 creatures instead of 1. Obviously, you can target your opponent's creatures, but on this instance, I would suggest targeting your own if you have a 1/1 kind of creature token. And you draw a card, you're also being able to benefit from those other cards which are getting, the benefits as well. So basically, there's lots of things that you're winning with here, and it also gives you that -1/-1 counter if you did want to target an opponent as well. Goes very well with this deck in particular, and you're drawing cards off the back of it as well. And you can do that multiple times per turn. If you want 4 or 5 cards, no problem. Just pay 5 life, 4 or 5 life, sacrifice 4 or 5 creatures, and essentially draw a card. And you can stack those -1/-1 counters on the same creature of your opponents. If you fancy one of their, if you're okay, right, I'm going on a tangent here, right? But if your opponent has a 5/5, got some great abilities, and you want that, right? You want that on your battlefield. You can just sacrifice 5 creatures, put 5 -1/-1s on that, draw 5 cards off the back of it, and then basically you can just cast that back. We've got things like Sanguine Bond that we'll go into in a moment, that when you lose life, you gain life and things like that. So there's lots of things that 1 life, it doesn't even matter. So yeah, this is an insane include in this deck. It does have a bottom ability, which is black, discard a card and proliferate. Not going to have much of an impact from this in this deck specifically, but that middle ability, mwah, chef's kiss, brilliant. Let's go on to the next. Blood Artist, 1 and a black, staple, creature, vampire. Whenever Blood Artist or another creature dies, target player loses 1 life and you gain a life. It's a 0/1, but that doesn't matter, right? It's whenever another creature dies, right? Stick on that for a moment. We're going to be targeting your opponent's creatures all of the time, right? So whenever their creatures die, not only are you going to benefit from exile, casting them from exile, but this is also basically giving you the ability to gain life and drain them. It's insane, the payoff that it's going to be giving you. If there's 10 creatures that die via a board wipe and you have this down, right? This is going to trigger. You're going to get 1 life for each. So you get 10 life. You also drain a target player 10 life as well. But not only that, you're going to be able to cast those cards from their exile, right? By paying that life back. So yeah, insane. It benefits massively by being in this deck, and it's going to fuel the engine of your commander as well. Zelandra Cutthroat is our next creature. It's a 1 colorless and a black. It's a creature human rogue ally, 1/1. Whenever this card or another creature you control dies, so it's you control, each opponent loses 1 life and you gain a life. So like I said earlier, with Seer, for example, you've got lots of kind of 1/1s that we're going to be getting out, and I'm going to cover those in a moment. Sacrifice those, drain your opponents, get some life back in the process, cast more creatures from exile. Or any cards, right? It doesn't have to be creatures. Like I say, if you've got a Rhystic Study from your opponent sitting in their exile, just cast it, right? If you have the life, it's going to give you an insane amount of payoff. You're basically shutting down all of your opponent's graveyard strategies, so they won't be able to reanimate or recursion. What's the word? I think that's the word. I don't know what the freaking hell that word was. But basically, you're going to be able to shut them down and also benefit in multitude of ways. So, yeah, insane. Get this one in your deck. Ayara, Widow of the Realm. I love this card. Goes great within this deck. It's a 1 colorless black legendary creature, elf noble, 3/3. You can tap it and sacrifice another creature or artifact. So basically, you're only going to be able to do this really once per turn because you have to tap it. However, sacrifice a creature or an artifact. Ayara deals X damage to target opponent or battle. You gain X life, where X is the sacrifice permanent's mana value. So if someone's targeting your commander, they want to get rid of it, at instant speed, you can tap this, sacrifice your commander, right? You can deal 9 damage to target opponent or battle. You'll gain 9 life, and then X, where X is the mana value. So yeah, insane. I think this gives you the ability to, if your stuff is getting targeted, you can actually sacrifice it to get payoffs from your other enchantments and other things. So basically, your opponents think they're getting one over you. Think again. That is never the case with this deck. You've always got something to respond with, and it's going to be doing bits. Braids Arisen Nightmare, 1 black legendary creature Nightmare. At the beginning of your end step, you may sacrifice an artifact, a creature, enchantment, land, or planeswalker. So you can only do 1 of those, and it's on your end step. So just one to note. If you do, each opponent may sacrifice a permanent that shares a card type with it. For each opponent who doesn't, that player loses 2 life and you draw a card. This is an insane payoff for this deck. It's only 3 mana to get this down. basically, if you're eyeing up some of your opponents, right, and they've got they've got an artifact that you fancy, and you've got a crappy artifact that's, you know, or not even a crappy artifact, but I don't know, you might have a food token or you might have a token, right? And you just say, okay, right, I'll sacrifice one of my treasure tokens, for example, or food token, whatever. Your opponents then will have to will either have to sacrifice an artifact that they've got, or they'll pay 2 life. They'll basically lose 2 life, and you draw cards. So if all 3 of your opponents choose to not sacrifice an artifact, you're gaining. They're losing 2 life, and you're gaining a card for each of those. So you're gaining 3 cards. They're all losing 2 life. Once per turn. I mean, it's pretty banging, because not only are you going to be able to, if they do decide to sacrifice that artifact, you can cast that from exile for paying the life, of course, that fuels your commander, but you're also potentially getting card draw off the back of it and draining your opponent's lives. I think it's great. I think it's an insane card. It goes really, really well with this deck as well. Reassembling Skeleton. This is a perfect card for the deck. Really, really well. Stick with me here. So you got 1 colorless and a black. It's a creature, Skeleton Warrior, 1/1. Basically, it gives you a repeat source of sacrificing. So when this is in your graveyard, you can pay 1 and a black and return it to the battlefield. So basically, if you've got that sack outlet, right, a repeat sack outlet, as long as you've got enough mana for this, you can repeatedly sack this per turn. So if you want to, say you want to sacrifice it to drain your opponents down, you sacrifice this, they sacrifice a creature if you've got one of the enchantments out earlier that I mentioned. You bring this back by paying the 2 in total. You can keep doing that, so you can get them to sacrifice 3 or 4 or 5 creatures per turn. You can bring those, you can, get them onto your battlefield by paying the exile, life costs. So yeah, insane. I think it's repeatable. So unless they exile this, they're going to really struggle to deal with it. Brilliant card to get in this deck. Grave Titan is insane as well in this deck. So 6 mana in total, 4 colorless and 2 black. It's a giant creature, 6/6, so big body with Death Touch. So it's gonna work perfectly. Death Touch is really great in this deck, because not only are you going to be able to swing and potentially deal some damage, and with things like Sanguine Bond, you're going to gain some life. Not only that, you're also, if you leave it up as a blocker, if your opponents try and swing at you, Death Touch takes their opponents out of the game, out of the creatures out of the game, right? They go into exile. If you block and kill them, then you can cast those cards. So yeah, it's going to be insane. And also, when it enters the battlefield, you put 2 creature tokens down, it fuels your sack outlet, and it incentivizes you to attack as well. So if your opponent's only got 1 or 2 creatures up, you like the abilities of those creatures, you can swing at them, hope that they'll block with one of them or both of them with the Death Touch. You take them out if you can get the damage through to both of them, and then you're getting creature tokens off the back of it. So perfectly fits in well with this deck. And then on to the next one. We've only got a few more cards left now, but we're getting into some of the token generation here. Ophiomancer is great in this deck because it's 2 colorless and a black, so 3 mana in total, which is quite a low cost for the payoff here. It's a 2/2 creature, human shaman. At the beginning of each upkeep, if you control no snakes, create a 1/1 black snake creature token with Death Touch. Note that this is each upkeep. So with those things like Viserys here, where you're going to be able to sacrifice a creature for a payoff, you can basically do this once each turn. Every single player's turn, you're going to be creating a snake if you don't have snakes. And if you do have snakes, fine. Just sacrifice it with Viserys here or any of the other sack outlets. Deal damage, get your opponents to sacrifice creatures off the back of it, whatever you've got, so comboing off. And then the next upkeep, do it again. Ophiomancer is perfect in this deck, and I think it's going to be insanely salty, but we're going to have a great time of playing it. So this is an auto include in my perspective as well. VALGAVOTH, this is a great card. I'm having a lot of fun playing this on Arena at the moment. And let me know if you'd like to see some Arena gameplay. I'm pretty much obsessed with Arena at the moment, and I have an insane discard deck, which I'm having a lot of fun with. So let me know in the comment section if you'd like to see some Arena gameplay. And on that note, subscribe, because we are bringing out some EDH gameplay on a weekly basis now, and we are going to be bringing more deck techs every single week. Back to the card. Aklazots, 3 colorless, black to cast, so 5 in total. Legendary creature, back guard, 4/4. Flying, lifelink, as I mentioned with the commander, goes perfectly with this deck because the flying makes it evasive and the lifelink means that you're basically going to be gaining some life back. Whenever this attacks, each opponent discards a card. For each opponent who can't, you draw a card. Brilliant. You want people to be able to discard because guess what? Discarding means that they put it into their graveyard. They can't if you've got your commander down. Instead, it's going into exile. You're going to be able to cast that card, right? So you're going to be able to just cast whatever they put into exile. So discarding is brilliant. If they can't discard, so if they've got no cards in their hand, then you're drawing a card. Win-win. Whenever an opponent discards a land card, you're getting a 1/1. That perfectly fuels your sack outlet. And then when it dies, you return it to the battlefield tapped and transformed. Basically, the tapped and transformed version of this card is a land card. And then if you meet a criteria, you can transform it back into Aklazots. Very easy to do. Yeah, this is very hard to get rid of for your opponents. It doesn't have ward, but basically if they get rid of it, fine. Next turn, it's going to untap. As long as you meet the criteria, you can bring Aklazots back. I mean, it's insane in this deck. Combos very nicely with your commander, and you've got the lifelink to get some life back to pay for those exile cards. Mind Twist, we've got you pay X into it and a black. It's a sorcery. Target player discards X cards at random from his or her hand. If that player does not have enough cards, his or her hand is discarded. This is incredibly salty, and it's insanely beneficial in this deck, right? So if your opponent has 5 cards in their hand, right? Let's just go with this as an example. All you've got to do is pay 6 into the X. And then because that X is more than the amount of cards they've got in their hand, by default, they have to discard their hand, unless they, of course, counter this. But if they don't, then they're going to have to discard their entire hand. If there's one last opponent against you, this can be a game ender because you're getting them to discard their hand. They're basically not being able to do anything. You're going to exile all of those cards, right, because of your commander, and you can play those by paying the life rather than mana cost. So you're benefiting from the cards they had in their hand. Insane. Literally, I think this is one of the best cards in this deck, and it's a game-ending deck basically. For a game-ending card, I think it is a win con in and amongst itself because you're completely shutting down one of your opponents from doing anything basically. So on to the next. Torment of Hellfire, an absolute staple, one of the most expensive in this deck. However, I think it's going to slap. So you pay into the X as much as you want with a black on top of it. It's a sorcery. Repeat the following process X times. Each opponent loses 3 life unless that player sacrifices a non-land permanent or discards a card. Insane. You're getting benefits from all of this, right? So you want your opponents to lose life because with things like Sanguine Bond, what's the other one that's like Sanguine Bond? I don't know. I didn't actually put it in the deck tech, but basically it's one of those cards that gives you life as well if your opponent loses it. Yeah, there's lots of those in black. So anyways, each opponent loses 3 life unless they sacrifice a non-land permanent or discard a card. I mean, it all pays into your commander's kind of strategy. You could pay 10 into this if it's later game, if you have 12 mana spare and your opponents have to do this 10 times, lose, you know, if they do not discard or sacrifice, that's 30 life. It's insane, right? And then you're going to have the amount of times they're going to sacrifice non-land permanents and discard a card. You're going to have such an array of cards to pick from that you want to cast on your turn from exile and just end the game. So again, this could be a game ender, and you can be finishing off everybody at the table with Torment of Hellfire. On to the next, we've got Liliana's Spectre. It's a 1 black, so 3 total cost creature, 2/1 with flying. When it enters the battlefield, each opponent discards a card. Very straightforward. Very easy kind of to understand here. It's flying, so it's evasive. You can get some damage through. That doesn't really matter. I mean, the main thing here is that each opponent is going to be discarding a card. So for 3 mana, you're forcing each of your opponents to discard a card, goes into exile. Like I say, fuels your commander perfectly. We've got Mesmeric Orb, 2 colorless. When a permanent becomes untapped, that permanent's controller puts the top card of his or her library into his or her graveyard. Each turn, you're basically going to be milling your opponents, which fuels your exile strategy perfectly as well, because fun fact, milling also means that you're putting cards into your graveyard, which you cannot do with your commander out. It goes straight into exile. You're gonna have a load of cards that you want to cast basically. So yeah, insane include Mindcrank, 2 colorless artifact again. When an opponent loses life, that player puts that many cards from the top or his or her library into his or her graveyard. Jesus Christ, this is insane. If you're going to be dealing like Torment of Hellfire, for example, 30 life in that example, it's probably a terrible example, but they're going to be basically milling 30, right? So every single time you're pinging off this damage, you're shooting 1 damage at them, you're shooting 2 damage at them at their opponent's life. They're going to be milling cards, and then that's going to be building this library of exile cards that you can choose from every one of your turns to cast without paying their mana cost, right? So you'll be paying life. One thing to note is that it's always basically going to be at sorcery speed, because you can't do it on your opponent's turn from your commander. So your commander, you can only cast from exile on your turn, but I think that's a small price to pay for the amount of benefit you're going to be getting from this deck in itself. Okay, we've only got a few cards left. So Exsanguinate, this is, you pay X into it with a black. Each opponent loses X life. You gain life equal to the life lost this way. You're going to need as much life as possible to be able to benefit from your opponent, from your commander's last ability. So this, if you paid X into it, you know, which could be 10, for example, then each opponent's going to be losing 10 life, and you're going to gain 30 life. Not only could this be a potential game ender for some of your opponents, if not all of them, but also you're going to be gaining 30 life. The amount of things you can cast from exile with 30 life is absolutely insane. So automatic include for me here. Grey Merchant of Asphodel, it's a 3 colorless black creature zombie 2/4. When it enters the battlefield, each opponent loses X life, where X is your devotion to black, and you gain life equal to the life lost this way. It's basically Exsanguinate, just in the form of devotion to black. We're playing a mono black deck. You're going to have 10, 12, if this is late game, 14 maybe. Black, right? So you're going to basically be dealing out that much damage to your opponents and gaining that much life, right? So I don't know, it's insane. If you think about 10 again, you're going to be basically getting 30 life back, and all of your opponents are going to be losing 10 life. It's insane. It's salty. Exactly what we want to be doing. Meat Hook Massacre perfectly suits this deck as well. X into it with black. When it enters the battlefield, each creature gets -X until the end of turn. Your commander is a 9/9. So if you want to get rid of all of your opponent's creatures that are like maximum of 6, then you can just pay 6 into this, for example, the additional. Get rid of all of your opponent's creatures. So there's loads that you can choose from when you want to cast from exile. And whenever a creature you control dies, each opponent loses 1 life. Whenever a creature an opponent dies, you gain 1 life. Brilliant. You can keep your commander out, wipe everything else, gain that much life, deal this much damage to your opponents, and have a shed load of creatures that you can cast from exile. I mean, yeah, it's going to do some insane stuff. And feel bad for your opponents, basically. And then the last card on this deck tech is Sanguine Bond. I've mentioned it a couple of times, but it's brilliant in this deck. So it's 3 colorless, black, black, enchantment. Whenever you gain life, target opponent loses that much life. I mean, it's insane. There's cards like that Veto vampire card that basically does the similar kind of thing where if you're gaining life, you're dealing that much damage. I think that's the one. Let me know in the comment section below if that's the one that I'm thinking of. But there's lots of things here that you can do with life gain. You're going to be wanting to get as much life gain as possible to fuel your commander. And basically, Sanguine Bond does that very, very, very nicely by damaging on the offset of that. So, yeah, that is the last card on this deck tech. Let me know what you think in the comment section below. We're back. Universes Beyond is back. Me and Sam took a little break just to get some stuff in order and plan the future. And this is our first deck tech back. There's several coming from Duskmourn because I love the set. I think it's going to be an exciting set. Let us know what you thought of this deck tech in the comment section below. Make sure you hit that sub button. Like I say, we're going to be doing EDH gameplay on a weekly basis. If you'd like to see some Magic Arena stuff, let me know in the comment section below. And let me know what cards you would add into this deck tech, because I'm always looking to learn as well, and I'm going to be building up this deck tech to get some gameplay underway as soon as Duskmourn releases in late September. So thanks everybody for sticking around. See you in the future. Peace.